What is happening, guys? Welcome to Test This Tech. And as you see before you, we have the RGDS. That's right, the device that everyone hated because of its obvious shortcomings, which they have fixed for the majority. So, to be fair, I'm going at this review not being really a big DS fan, but I felt like I really had to at least do a review on it in the channel, having the news about it, the controversy and all that stuff. And then just really like, who is this for, aside from a DS owner, but how it fits within the diaspora of all these handhelds that we've been so accustomed to from Anbernic. Okay. So I wanted to give kind of a fair review on my thoughts on it, not being really a DS person. So the first things first, I think one thing that has to be known that a lot of people aren't talking about is the build quality. The build quality of this device is solid. It has this glossy front, similar to a 3DS, right? So it has that gloss front here of the texture, but then everything else is matte. So the back of it is matte. Opening this, it's matte, which I like. It would be nice for devices to go back to matte versus glass, glass fronts. Not really a big fan of that. But yeah, so as far as for the feeling of the device, it is a nice feeling device. Talking about the hinge on this, Anbernic is actually known for really solid hinges. Talking about the 34XX the 35XXSP. They've been known to have really good hinges versus like some of the prior Miu hinges, and then even the prior Retroid Flip. Flip 1 and 2, but then the Flip 2, the newer version of it, they kind of adjusted the curvature, kind of fixing that, the cracks, and not, even though I think it was blown out of proportion compared to, what it actually was, as far as for kind of the big humbug about it. Anbernic is really in that spot. For this one, it's funny. Someone on Reddit said it feels like you're doing a sit-up opening the case. I kind of agree. It is a little sturdy. Like, it feels sturdy, but you feel like you really have to push the screen up to get it fully open. The only thing I'm worrying about is this side here. I feel like this plastic is rubbing it up against this. And call me crazy. I could be completely wrong. I feel like there's a gap here for it to breathe. But I feel like the reason why it's rubbing really hard is that it may be rubbing against these plastic edges. So 6 months from now, I don't know if this is going to be a device that may have hinge issues. So not really sure in that particular front. As far as for the feeling of the buttons, these buttons feel fine. As far as the ABXY, no real issues there. For the D-pad, it's not going to be like your rubber membrane from like the RG477 M, or even from, say like the 35XX Pro. This is going to have more of a clicky kind of experience, but I think it's a solid D-pad. I was playing Hollow Knight using this D-pad, and you gotta have some serious diagonals with that game, and I didn't really have any issues on that. The analog sticks, kind of a different story. I'm not really used to these analog sticks. I don't know if these are the same ones on the 34XXSP. I kind of wish that these were the same analog sticks from the RG557 or the RG Slide. And then also you get L3 and R3. These ones, there's no button when you push them down. Nothing happens when you push down these sticks. So you just have the rotation of them. It kind of feels like there's cardinal snapping on the sticks. But overall, they do the job. You do kind of have to feel like you really have to push it up, down, left, right for it to move. It's not a very smooth rotation when you're pushing the analog sticks. But yeah, all the other buttons are fine. Definitely clicky. So, late at night or whatnot, when you're playing a game, you are going to wake up your partner if you're playing games laying down on this with this. Once again, clicky on the R1 L1. Not the biggest fan of that, but it just is what it is. Talking about the screens, so there's a couple things I realized with the screens. There is a slight, probably is the type of ghosting on the screen. It's not terrible, because I know like the Odin 2 kind of is known for having kind of a ghosting on the screen. I wouldn't say it's as bad as an Odin 2, at least from my eyes. I do see some ghosting here. It's either light bleed or ghosting. It's one of those things. But from a hardware perspective, all around, I mean, this is 129 for the device. It feels pretty good. I think it feels more solid than a $100 device. So you have that. Now, obviously, as far as games, Darrell, what are the games? How are the games play? If we talk about DS, obviously, since they fixed that issue, I did do the update with Anbernic, the 1.4. And when you do that update, if you don't want to wait for Game OS, which you should if you are a DS owner, or if you're looking forward to DS, why not? Look forward to Game OS. But if you just want to get the update for now, because I received this, it did not have the update included. I had to download it from Anbernic's website. I had to download the toolkit, and it downloads everything for you to press download. But I had to install all of that, and it's not in English. So I had to use my phone and do the Google Lens for it to translate. So I knew what the heck I was doing when I had to put the image on an SD card. On an SD card to flash it on here. So the process wasn't that bad. It was just, I had to figure out what everything was saying per se. So after doing that, and playing some of the games, it seems, again, I had the device and I did the update right away. So I couldn't really tell when it was not fixed and when it was fixed. The rubber meets the road really when it comes to the processor of the device. So as far as for the processor, obviously, as you guys know, it's the RK3568. That is the processor for this. And that processor is not as powerful as some of the previous devices that Anbernic has made. It's not as powerful as the Unisoc T820. It's not as powerful as the Dimensity 8300. So it's definitely not as capable as those, right? So I think because of that, if you just want to play DS, you don't have to worry about it. Have a ball. This will do most 90% of those DS games. But if you want to play something a little bit outside of that realm, then that's where you're going to have a rubber meets the road situation. So, I put a post saying, you can run some Switch games on this device. But guess what? The Mangmi Air X can also run Switch games. And surprise, it's going to run them better just because of the processor. And there's actually a driver that you can download from the Eden site when you do the press fetch and it gives you a recommendation. It gives you an actual driver recommendation. This doesn't have any driver support when it comes to that. So there are some Mali GPU drivers that you can download. I can't tell you if any of them actually work efficiently. I did try a few, but I didn't see any significant things as far as like, oh, this driver, if you use this, this will be a huge difference. But yes, you're getting 10, 13 frames, on average, some 20 when it comes to those Switch games. The other thing to think about too is that if there's an Android parallel of the platform, right? So for example, Streets of Rage 4, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Shredder's Revenge. Yes, there are Switch games for that, but there's also Android versions of those, and they're full. It's the full game, and it's going to run better, So hopefully with Gamma OS, there is a Google Play option, so you can actually just download that game and buy it. But that is the other issue of the caveat. This has very small storage space. So it's 32 gigabytes. I had a 512 gigabyte SD card in here, and I had it where if anything that I downloaded from Chromium, because that's the browser that you use for this guy, it downloads directly on the SD card side. So that was very useful, in that particular notion. But when it comes to, say, you want to download some additional Android games, I can't tell you if they're all going to download on the SD card, especially a lot of them have install sizes too. for these newer ones. So I don't think those are going to all download to the SD card. Every game is different. So there's a rubber that meets the road here. Of course, playing PlayStation 1 on this, playing some N64, obviously all the Game Boy Color games and all advanced games, those are going to be fine, not a problem. But at that point, you're kind of staring at an additional screen that you're not really using. For this device, you can only turn off the extended display, which is the one on the top. I want to say for the AYN3, you can choose which display to turn off. But for this one, you cannot. And I'm hoping that Gamma OS fixed that. But that's the thing, right? So if you're getting this to play DS, and you're playing it at a slightly higher resolution, right? You're getting better screens, regardless of the DS Lite or what have you. This is going to look better because the screens are better than the original DS Lite. But as far as for anything past that, it kind of doesn't make sense to use this for anything else. Just because there's other devices that are cheaper when it comes to playing your PlayStation 1, Game Boy Color games, and all those things if you want to veer away from DS. And yeah, it's just I feel like they rushed this device. They were almost there. They were almost there on this. And this could have been something that could have been a nice budgetary option of an AOIN Thor, even if it had a T820 chipset and if it had the 557 sticks, give it 128 gigabytes of storage, have it to be maybe just a flat 200 or 220 or something. People would get it. People would get it because it would have the power of your PS2 GameCubes and whatnot. It would be able to play a decent amount of Switch because we've seen videos online where people have played Switch games on T820 devices like the RG Cube, like the 406V, 406H, the Anbernics. So, yeah, I just feel like that they didn't put enough into this to make it where it makes sense to get it outside of just playing DS games. So clearly, obviously, if you want DS and you just want a device specifically for DS, then yeah, this is a great option. But outside of that, you kind of have an issue where it just, you can get a lot of other devices that are going to be cheaper and perform better, i.e. the Mamie Air X. If you're trying to play Switch games on this just for science, go for it. But the Mamie Air X will play those Switch games better. So that is kind of my take when it comes to the RGDS. This couple of other notes is the speakers are not good. A lot of inconsistency on the crackling. Could be an emulation issue. Could be an emulation thing. But in all fairness, all these Anbernic devices do emulation, and I haven't heard crackling like that, like from these. So they kind of skipped on the speakers for this device. And then also, too, since it doesn't have the Google Play Store installed because of the limitations, that is another issue when it comes to downloading additional applications on this. So, I was using Aurora Store. When you upgrade to Gamma OS, it includes Aurora Store. So you can download some some additional apps that don't necessarily need Google to verify them. So like Z Archiver, Proton VPN, there's some things you can download from there. But when it comes to the Google Store, it's just, it's not there. So that's going to limit those things. But again, this is 32 gigabytes. It does run pretty warm playing it. One of the bigger issues is probably battery life for this. So one thing to think about is that while, yes, these are better screens, your better resolution compared to the original DS Lite, the original DS Lite had a pretty decent battery life. I mean, compared to this, right? So once again, going back to the notion of you're just doing this if you're just getting the device for DS, there's going to be some limitations. Battery life will be one of them for this. Another note is the Wi-Fi on this. The Wi-Fi on this is very inconsistent. I had a couple of times where I had to turn off the device and turn it back on because the Wi-Fi cut out and it just would not go back on. So that was a whole other thing that I had to deal with, So yeah, I think if you love DS that much, and you want to play it on bigger screens, right? This is definitely something to consider, especially if you have other Anbernic devices from the past, from the prior devices. A lot of those prior devices, they came with an SD card that had games on them. And if you decide to keep those games when you purchase the device, you can upload them here, right? So I purchased the Anbernic RG40 XXB, came with some DS games. I put the DS games on here. So that's how I was able to test out, some of these titles. So it's just that's kind of where I'm at on this. So if you're a really big fan of DS, then I would say go for it. But when it comes to kind of getting outside of the spectrum of DS, saying, hey, what else can this device do? Not that much, because of the lack of the Google Play Store support, the lack of the space, the battery life is low. The Wi-Fi isn't very consistent. So, transferring different files and whatnot, having a flash drive with a OTG cable to plug into on the back is very useful. Because of that, I was hoping there was going to be a quick share option on here, where basically you use Bluetooth, you can transfer from one device to another from files. That is not available on here. So there's just a lot of rubber meets the road situations on this. I don't know if I'm going to hold on to mine just because I'm not that big of a DS fan. I did want to get it just to review it on the channel, but I wanted to see if there's any other, things I can test out with it. That's kind of where I'm at. But I appreciate you guys watching the video. I know this is a much longer one than I usually do. Let me know in the comments if you do have the RGDS, if you enjoy it, if you were looking forward to Gamma OS. Shout out to Gamma Squeeze, man. That guy works crazy on these devices, and definitely salute to him. But yeah, I'll leave it here. Again, Test This Tech. I'll catch you guys next video. Thanks a lot for watching.